Hi, I'm Carol Fitzgerald from Book Reporter, and I'm going to do something different on the program that we're going to do right now. I am going to talk about my 40 bets on selections from the year, 40 books that I'm betting you'll love. May not love all of them the way I did, but I'm going to give you selections that I think if you go out and go to your local bookstore, go to the library, order online, you're going to find something that definitely might have skipped your eye before or something that you've heard about, but here's another take on it. So 40 books that we're also running a contest about until January 10th at noontime. And someone is going to enter and win all 40 of these books. And 10 other people are each going to win four. And we're going to be doing a lot of packing at my house because these books are here right now and we're super excited about this. I'm going to start out with three books that are, let's say, super bets on. They're the books that some of you've heard about, but more than that, I want to say that these are books that call to me for a very special reason. I'm going to start with a book that's probably not going to be a surprise. It's Kristin Hannah's The Women, which is set in the Vietnam era. And for those of us who lived through it, this book rings so true. But it's also going to share with you things that you just didn't know about before. In it, we've got a woman named Frankie. She leaves her very wealthy family in California, goes overseas, goes to Vietnam as a nurse. And while she's there, she sees a lot of atrocities. She sees a lot of people really like in very, very difficult situations. And she has to learn like how to handle herself in a place where there are rules, but there aren't really rules, meaning you're going to jump in and try to save somebody and you're following the book or you're just doing what you think has to work and what has to happen. So the whole first half of the book is Frankie making her decision to go and Frankie being there. And then you're halfway through the book and you realize what's going to happen now. And Frankie's going to come home. And when she gets there, oh, she's not going to be treated like a hero because the people who went to Vietnam were not treated as heroes. They came back. One of the great shames on this country. They came back, they were ridiculed, spit on, and she came back thinking she'd done something great and couldn't figure out what everybody was feeling about it. She gets very, very, goes to a dark place and then brings herself out. And I just thought this was a great book about a time period. It's a time period that hasn't been explored in depth in history like World War II, but it's something that many of us do remember, and it's still historical fiction. I don't like to think sometimes that I was living during the time of historical fiction. It's won many accolades. It was Goodreads Book of the Year, The Women. If you haven't read it, I definitely pick it up. Next book is by an author that I love, whose name is Marjan Kamali. This book is The Lion Women of Tehran. What can I say? She's the author of The Stationery Shop, which I also loved and was a bets on selection. And what is this is a story of friendship. Friendship between two women, women who were in two classes in Iran. One was very, very part of the elite, and the other one was downtrodden and poor. And the one who's poor brings a lot of joy to the girl who has a lot of money. She shows her friendship, she shows her love, she shows her companionship. And then they split for a while. And as their friendship fractures, and as they come back together, one is now living definitely the life of luxury, and the other one, well, her life is a little bit more dicey. And they meet at school again as one is there as a scholarship student. And let's just say friendship, you see how it gets tested. You see how girls will test each other. But then all kinds of things happen in Iran. And one of the characters goes to the United States and the other one stays behind. And what we learn is what happened there in that country, how we looked at it here in the States, and also what it meant for their friendship, because these two were lion women. And the lion women are the women who stand up and sit there and say, we're going to take care of each other, even if no one else is. And we're going to take care of those who we love. So there we've got The Lion Women of Tehran, really, really highly recommended. Now, everybody knows I love thrillers. And one of the first thrillers I picked during the year was at Versali Wins by Ashley Elston. Ashley was long time known as a YA author, and this was a huge breakthrough title for her. Yes, it was a Reese pick. Yes, we had that happening for it. But more than that, it is a really, really twisty, turny thriller that you sit down and you start reading and go, oh, I think I've got this nailed. You're not. You're going to be going in all kinds of different directions. And it's like, really, you're going to see what is the first lie and what does that mean? And what does the title mean? But more than that, you're going to be twisting around from page one right through to the end. A super accomplished thriller. It's done extremely well this year. So you might not have missed it, but if you did, highly recommend it. Next, we've got, let's go to Summer at the Saints. Saint. Oops, let me see if I can get this cover to come up well. Okay, it's beautiful cover. Let me pull back. Okay. Summers at the Saint by Mary Kay Andrews. This book takes place at a hotel that is based on a hotel I know, which is Sea Island, Georgia. And my parents actually honeymooned there and then brought us back for, I think it was their 25th anniversary or one of their big anniversaries. So I have spent time at the cloisters at Sea Island, and she really captures what happens when you're got this really luxurious hotel. But where's the help from? The help is from everywhere in the towns around. They're the haves and the have-nots, the people who have been, oh, just, touched upon and have lots of money, and those who are sitting there working the place. So our main character here, well, she's somebody who's from the other side of town, and she's married into the family that owns the hotel. And from there, you get to see background at the hotel, like what happens behind the scenes. And at the same time, we've got a mystery going on. We've got all kinds of action. And it's just one of those really fun reads that I was turning the pages so quickly, saying, well, what's going to happen now? And you're really going to feel like you're at the hotel. You're going to feel like you're on the grounds, whether you're there as a guest or you're a worker. And you're going to see the back end of what happens at one of these big hotels where you feel like everything is just so smooth and polished. And downstairs on the other side, lots is happening, including what is the rest of the family thinking about her? And what's her position going to be? Her husband's not around anymore. There are changes happening in the family. What's going to happen to her? It's got Summers at the Saint. Really fun read. I think it's one of Mary Kay Andrews' best. Next, I've got Husbands and Lovers by Beatriz Williams. Beatriz usually writes in two different time periods. That one is way back in history. This one's more contemporary. And what we've got at the beginning of the story is a woman, son is at camp, and she's a single mom. And while he's at camp, he ends up eating some mushrooms. And these mushrooms are not the psychedelic kind, the kind you're not supposed to eat in the forest. And he immediately goes into kidney failure. And this is something that actually does happen to people. And Nicholas Evans had this happen years ago with his wife, and his sister-in-law and brother-in-law, where they ate some mushrooms and the next day were violently ill to the point where they had kidney shutdown. So I'm thinking this is like totally true. So now she's got to find a match to get a kidney for this child. And his father just happens to be a really big rock star. Like we're talking really big. And she hasn't seen him in years. Like he doesn't even know that there's this child. And what happens when she goes back to the place where she met him, the area where she met him at the beach, and figure out what goes on from there? Lots of fun in this book. And more than that, you're saying they were saying like that moment where he sits there and looks at the child and goes, whoa, that looks like little me. Really, really great moment. Husbands and Lovers. Totally enjoyed it. Next, we've got a book that I feel was so underrated. Hold the books over here. That's the trick. Days I Love You Most by Amy Neff. I feel this book didn't get the big attention I wanted to do. It was a Today Show pick a couple of weeks ago, but it came out the end of July, and it is just terrific. It's a love story. It's the story of a marriage. It is a couple that has been living together for years, doing the ups, the downs, the times that you're like not so happy with each other, and the times you're totally smitten and in love. Times where you're raising your children and life isn't so easy, and the times when you just look back and say, aren't we proud of what we've done? It's a beautiful story of a marriage. It's a love story. It's a long marriage. And what's amazing is Amy writes really well about marriage, and she's only in her 30s. She has two young children, and the fact that she's captured so many of the emotions that people go through. It's set in a beautiful beach town, and as you sit there and read it, it's a slim novel. This is one you can get through really quickly, but by the same token, it's one of those stories that you're not going to forget after you finish reading it. I highly recommend The Days I Loved You Most. Now we've got a book by Anne Hood. Let's go do this. Yeah, Anne Hood, which is called The Stolen Child. Anne Hood loves World War One. She loves reading about it. She loves books about it. She and her son have been to the battlefields of World War One. And one of the things that really impressed her were when the men were standing in their bunkers and they were, hidden down, because remember, World War One was very different combat-wise than World War Two. They're in these bunkers. There was art that was drawn in there. And she thought, gee, isn't this really interesting? How people, occupied their time while they're just waiting for something to happen in the trenches. So as she's seeing that and she's thinking about this, she thinks about, well, what if there was somebody whose town was being bombed? And what if this woman walked over and handed the man two things? One of our soldiers. One is a painting that she's done, little tiny painting, but beautiful. And the second thing is her child. And she says, basically, protect him. Take this child and make sure that he is okay. Years later, he's haunted. He's absolutely haunted by what happened because where did this child go? He knows where he left him, but where did he end up? And now this man is much, much older. He has the gruff attitude of, remember what Griffin Dunn's character was on This Is Us, the older father that came back? Well, this is exactly how snarky this man is. And a young girl in the town where he lives, she's like trying to break out of the town. She's trying to get out and do something different, but she's stuck at this moment. She's stuck in where she is. And then she gets this offer with him to go to Europe and to sit there and try and track down where this child is. The looking for the child is an amazing adventure for both of them because they go to many places to try to do this. And there are other things that happen along the way. So not a lot about World War One out there. Well, not as much as World War Two. Let's just say that. So here you've got The Stolen Child. Next up, I'm going to go to The Cliffs by J. Courtney Sullivan. This book, see how chunky this book is? One day during the summer, I stood in the pool and read this book basically from cover to cover. It was that sharp and that much fun. There was this feeling that I was there. Like I'd look up and say, wait, I'm not in Maine. I'm not where these people are. And it's a Reese's Book Club selection as well. But what I'm really loving is there's this home. And I always think that homes, like really beautiful homes, can be their own characters in the story. And this one is. And this woman for years has known about this place. And she's actually rummaged around it when no one was there. And then someone moves into the house and they start to redo it, start to change the charm of it. But they also uncover some secrets that were there on the property. And as they're moving things around, you start to see that there were a lot bigger stories that were happening on this property than what we already knew. And I just enjoyed it because it was atmospheric. I love the characters in it. I felt like everybody was really real. And like I said, I just stood in the pool reading it from cover to cover. And it was really funny because my husband kept coming outside and he goes, "You're still standing there." And I said, "Yeah, it's still a really good book." Let me go next to something because there are times when I like to read books because I don't know anything about what the woman is talking about or what the author is talking about. And I've got this here in Long After We Are Gone, which is by Terah Shelton Harris. I also interviewed her, and I really should note how many of these authors I interviewed because it was most of them. Terah takes us through something that happened after the Civil War. And what we had was slaves were being freed, and there was chances to get land. And when they got this land, the rule was you had to keep it in your family. You had to keep the papers all the way through. So long after you were gone, the land would still stay in the family. Now, for a long time, this land was places on swamps that nobody else wanted, or places out on the water. Because at the time, it was everyone wanted to be farming crops and they wanted to be inside and they wanted to be able to have their farmland and be able to take care of their property that way. This is land more on the outskirts. But then what happens? All of a sudden, beachfront property becomes really hot and people come in, developers that want to buy it. And what's interesting with this is people don't, one of the people in the book does not want to make sure he wants to make sure the land stays in the family. And he says, like, just keep the land. Don't let the land go away. And there's somebody else in the family who says, there's money here, and I want the money. And what you're looking at is a family that's torn in a couple of different directions of, do we take the money or do we preserve the land that's been part of our family for generations? And it's the idea of the land is bigger than just the land itself. It's also showing the sign of ownership of something that was like taken back when everything else had been taken away for years. Think about it though, the waterfront property and how popular that would be now, and why people would be looking at that, whereas before it was something no one cared about. Really interesting. I went back and read a lot of the history behind this, what was happening, and I think that something, if you want to become aware of something that a lot of times I'm delving into books because I don't know about a particular topic long after we are gone. Okay, now I've got two slim novels, and I mean slim. I mean novellas, folks. Okay. First is by Sophie Kinsella. And oh my gosh, when we read every Sophie Kinsella book, oh my gosh, her heroine was one that we just loved hearing about. And it was actually funny because Sophie was very, very much like that heroine, the one who went shopping all the time, the shopaholic, the one who rang up all the big credit card bills. Yeah, that was sort of like the story of her. And it became such a big story as well because I think a lot of people could relate to exactly who she was when she was that woman in her 20s and early 30s. Well, this is a very different book. Sophie, a couple of years ago, contracted whatever. She found out she had glioblastoma, which is the one of the kinds of cancer there is no cure for right now. It's a brain cancer, and she battled through it with her family. She did all her treatments. She's on the other side. At the writing of this book, she was cancer free, but it's one of those little nagging things that's back there, kind of waiting to happen. So this book is called What Does It Feel Like? And it's not a memoir. It's a novel about a woman very much like her, who has a lot of children. She had 5 children like she does. And what this woman is doing as she talks to the children about what's going on, and she becomes acclimated to what her new life is like when she has to learn to walk again. And she learns all these things that she forgot along the way. It's really a fabulous thing that she comes back to with this book. And it's the way Sophie feels about real life right now is her husband says, "You want to swim with the dolphins?" And she says, "No." And she says, "Do you want to go to this? Do you want to go to Paris? Do you want to go here? Do you want to go there?" And she's like, "No." She says, "What I would really like is normal, but like better. So that if we're going to eat a scone with marmalade, let's get the best marmalade. And let's do our normal life, but better." And I think it's a really poignant thing to sit back and talk about and think about every once in a while of what's really best and better in life and how do you really achieve it, especially when you've had such a life-threatening situation like she's been through and sort of has this like target on her back of what could happen again. Really, really enjoyed this. Once again, slim folks. Now, I know many of our readers love Nita Prose. And here we've got a Maid novella, short story, mistletoe mystery, yep, a novella. And we've got the same characters. We've got Molly the maid, we've got Lawhon, her boyfriend, we've got Christmas at the hotel. So lots of fun because what you're doing is it's just the mistletoe mystery. What's going on and what is going to happen that is absolutely fabulous at the end. Nita has another book in the Maid series, which is coming out in April. So this is just something to sort of tide you over. This is a book I call that you can get, and while you're making the Christmas cookies, they all cook for 20 minutes. You can be reading little chapters of this in between and just having some fun. Next, we've got the Paris novel by Ruth Reichl. Now, it's interesting because there's a reason she wrote this. Her editor passed away, and before she passed away, she said, "I would really have liked you to write a novel about Paris, a novel about the glamour of the place and why you love it so much and get us into the food and everything that's going on." And in this book, a woman travels with her mother to Paris and what happens to them, all their adventures. And you see the food of Paris, the fashion, and you see what makes it special. And you see it through both of their eyes. And you see things that you really didn't think were going to be ended up happening. It's really terrific. I'm not going to give away more because I want you to be able to explore Paris on your own. This is a book about a topic that not everybody's going to take well to. It's by Roxana Robinson. It's called Leaving. What we've got here are two characters who were together for years and they ended up not getting married. They married other people. One of the women now is single. She's divorced, and the other is still married to his wife, but unhappily. And the two of them meet up again and they realize how many of the same interests they still have. And there's this moment of what do you do? Where do you go? Do you destroy your marriage or walk from your marriage? Do you sit there and say, yes, he's the one, but he's married right now? What is that going to mean for me? What do you end up doing? And the whole thing of leaving is explored. The ending is absolutely like wonderful. I mean, not wonderful in a wonderful way, but it's very, very interesting to see how the ending wraps up. But this is Leaving by Roxana Robinson. A topic of someone having an affair is one that, people tread on lightly. A lot of people don't want to read about. But to see the story and how it unfolds here and the questions that keep coming up in both of their minds, very, very well done. Next, we've got two authors that I love. I've known them, I met them at, I guess it was 2020 in January in Philadelphia at the American Library Association. It's Alli Frank and Asha Youmans. This book is called Boss Lady. And what we've got is a woman who's working in the airport. She's the person that drives those little carts that take you from one place to the other if you don't want to go out to the gate or you're not strong enough to go out to the gate by yourself. She takes you out there. And she actually makes friends with the people that she takes along the way. There's one woman that comes in all the time. She's very, very elegant. And she comes in and says, like, oh, here's your tip, and this is what I want to do. And they actually call and reserve her. At the same time, she wants to do her own business. And she is out coming up with ideas all the time about what she should do. And she's got an ex-husband who's really not been around that much, and she's been raising her children on her own. And they're thrown up against each other on one of those shows where somebody's going to get the money to fund their business and the other person is not. And there's all kinds of entanglements that happen along the way, but it's Boss Lady. So will she be able to take off from that airport and do something new, or is she going to be where she is forever? And it's got that the tone of the single mom and dealing with the two children. She's got a great friend, and you see the value of that friendship. And she's got family around her that is trying to figure out like what she's doing at every moment. Boss Lady. Next up, we've got Like Mother, Like Mother. And this is by Susan Rieger. I had the pleasure of interviewing her. In fact, I've interviewed most of these authors. Okay, here's what we've got. There's actually three generations of women in this family. First generation is a woman who was married and she had some children, and her husband had her put away and he had her committed. And this is after there was a lot of violence in the house. He was violent towards her. And after she was gone, he turned violent towards the children. But the children didn't know, like, really where their mother went. They knew she wasn't at the house anymore, but what had happened to her? And it kind of haunted them in their lives of who was this woman and where did she go? So one of the women in the book goes on, and one of the children goes on and becomes a big editor of a Washington paper. And she is very, very well liked. She's the kind of person that goes to the White House for dinners. She goes to all high level meetings. She's not around the house much. Husband Joe is the one that really takes care of the house and takes care of their daughters while she's out and about. And her younger daughter really doesn't like this. And she writes this, like, kind of like a fictitious memoir about what their family's like. And it gets out there, and her mom's not too pleased that she's done this. Family's not too pleased that she's done this. But she decides to sit there and say, like, well, what ended up, like, where is my grandmother? And when her mother passes away, she sits there and goes to find her. And what you're going to see is a trail that went through these women's lives that's like mother, of what ended up happening. And it's really, really well done. Once again, I'm talking super long novel, folks. We're talking novel with a lot to talk about and a lot to think about. And I really should talk about, these books as we're going through, how many will make for really good reading group guide discussions. Okay, this is The Frozen River by Ariel Lawhon. I just read this a couple weeks ago because she was going to be doing a show with us. Now, what's interesting is this was one of those books that our readers directed me towards. It came out December 5th last year. I didn't read it till about December 1st this year. And what was interesting is I wanted to see why readers were so excited about this. It takes place in Maine in winter. It takes place on a home that's a place that's on a river, and there's a body that's found frozen in the river. How did he get there? What's going on? At the same time, the woman who's the protagonist in the book is a midwife. And what she does is she births many of the babies around the town. She's actually based on somebody that Ariel found when she was doing her research and is a historical figure. And this woman, she has 30 years in a notebook of all the babies that were born, what ended up happening. She never lost a baby. None of them were lost in birth. And what ended up happening, what it was like in very cryptic notes. And Ariel came across something about her when she was actually waiting for an obstetrician when she was there for her fourth son. And instead of going home as he was running late, she sat there and she found this little story and it just niggled in the back of her head. And then she started doing research into this woman named Martha and what had Martha done through the years. So it's a brilliant book. It takes place in a very short period of time, but by the same token, you get to know the people in the community and you get to know how people feel about everybody in the town as well. And what is the mystery? What ended up happening here? There's also a lot of young women ended up pregnant before they were married in this book. And she writes writes about that like all the time, and that there were a lot of premature 9-pound babies. And I found that pretty interesting as well. Ariel did a terrific interview with us about it that I highly recommend. It was a one of our book club, Book at You Know What book groups events. Dawn Tripp has written this fabulous book about Jackie Kennedy. It's a novel. But what she has done is she's written it in what she sees as the voice of Jackie. Jackie looking at Jack across the room and seeing what's really in his eye. Is it Jackie or is it another woman? What's happening that she's getting caught up as this woman who was taking fabulous pictures and writing this column for the paper is all of a sudden being swept up in politics. And all of a sudden she is, let's say, the person everybody wants to see and everybody wants to know about. And all of a sudden, everybody's looking at Jackie's style and what Jackie does and what Jackie does at the White House. There's fabulous, what I think is a black and white film someplace of when Jackie decorated the White House and what it was like, because we didn't have color television at that point. And what this has done, it's shown and told in the voice of Jackie. It's not a biography. It's not, looking at her like that. It's how Dawn interprets she felt as she went through the day. I was completely caught up in the story. I was thinking of her with her children and what it was like living with Jack. There was one night that he came home very late, and what did she do? She got up very early and went out and rode her horse. And how no matter where she was, she had to have a place of solitude as well. Instead of just sitting there and saying, okay, this is going to be just the White House. And even she says, at any place that's connected with politics, I need to get away from. And she always had a fabulous horse farm, and it was something she was really interested in. She actually had a place close to where we live in New Jersey, and she would be out there and she'd be in the shops and she'd be out and about. And people would say she was just like a very normal, lovely person. So just a very interesting story. Got two books, two memoirs here that really struck me. The first one is Did I Ever Tell You by Genevieve Kingston. Call her Gwen, but Genevieve is on the cover of the book. Here's what's happening. When Gwen is 4 years old, her mother's diagnosed with cancer. And by the time she's 11, her mom has passed away. And when she's about 8, mom realizes, I'm not sure if I'm going to beat this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create memories for my kids for when I'm not here. And she proceeds to take a box, and put together a birthday present for each of the years that she's not going to be around. So she shares a birthday actually with her daughter, with Gwen, and she says, okay, this is what's going to be for your 12th birthday. This is 13. This is when you get your first period. This is when you learn to drive. This is when you learn to vote. This is when you learn to drink. This is at the time she's writing this, there are three left. It's get engaged, get married, and your first child. Those are the only three. And she's been carrying this box with her around the country wherever she goes. One point, her apartment is broken into in her of all the things that she didn't want taken, it was the box. The box is the thing that she's carted around. And there's a picture on her website of what the box looks like. And what it will be, we were going to read this in book group, and everybody was, I have a group of young moms in my book group, and they just thought it was too sad. And it's interesting because I was seeing it the other way because I was seeing what fabulous memories she was able to share for moments she might not be there. And or she wasn't going to be there. And she did something really special. She told her daughter that the daughter had been seeing therapists along the way, as had the mother. And at one point, Genevieve says, gee, I really wish I knew what my mother thought about this. And she says, well, before she passed away, she gave you permission to see her therapist. And she is able to meet with that person and learn more about her mother that she didn't know before. And then there's a twist in this book as well. Something else happens to Genevieve and how that turns a lot of what happens in her life as well by what she unfolds and something else that happens later. So there you've got Did I Ever Tell You? Next, we've got The Wives. Wives is by Simone Garrido. Here's why I love this book. Like Kristin taking a look at the Vietnam War, we've got a number of people right now where their husbands are overseas. They're deployed places, and they usually don't even know where they are. They don't know if they're in Lebanon. They don't know where they're in Syria. No idea where they're deployed to. And when these women are left home alone, which is basically what it is, they become really compadres to each other. As the book starts out, Simone's husband, or husband to be, has decided that he wants to join the army. She's a pacifist. She thinks anything but this is a good idea. But he says, if it's picking between the army and you, I'm going to pick the army. And she picks to stay with him. Well, they end up in a town in Georgia that is exactly the opposite of every place she's ever lived. She ends up with a group of women that are not all the kind of people that she would have picked to live with. But by the same time, a camaraderie happens around these women because the only thing they're all rooting for is their husbands coming home safe. That is the most important thing. And while they're gone, they'll have wine together, they'll have dinner together, they'll take care of each other's children, they'll take care of each other. And when the husbands call, they never know where they are. The calls are screened. They never know what's going on. So the wives have to bond very, very tightly together. She is absolutely terrific to talk to. The book was very, very poignant because you don't really think about that much anymore. We're not at war. We're not at war in Afghanistan and Iran, but there are things happening around the country. Remember last January, I took a weaving course. And a woman said her son was part of the National Guard and he was being deployed the next day. And I said, do you know where he's headed? And she says, well, it's Lebanon, Syria. I forgot, there's another summer place in the Mideast. And I thought, gee, there's nothing happening there. And then think about the last couple of months. And what's really interesting is we think we know so much and we know so little. And we're told so little for many, many reasons. And what they said is, this woman said, and Simone said, her husband will often read the paper and say, that's not what's really happening. Where it's not shared with us what's really happening. But by the same token, these people are living it as part of their lives every day. So well done. She's does a really good job of speaking about where she came from and where she came to as a result of this. Her husband is still active. He is still deployed, and they have two young children. So when I met her at a lunch, she said he will probably stay in for his full 20 years. So think about like how their lives are altered as a result of what's going on. So there we've got The Wives, Simone Garrido. Next, we have a book that I sat and listened to in the car. And the car, the house, any place I could listen to it. It's Stanley Tucci's, and it is What I Ate in 1 Year. So we walk through a year of him shopping for food, cooking food, having parties, going to dinners, going to restaurants, some good, some bad, and sharing what he ate every day for a year. Now, I have to tell you, when I hit November, when I was listening to them, I was really wishing there were more than 12 months in the year because he was so terrific at telling his stories. It was not just about the food he ate, it's how he felt when he was eating it, and also things that were going on in his life and his wife's life and what their two young children were eating as well, which always makes me laugh because we always think that they're going to be such adult foods. And then all they're going, like pasta with butter would be absolutely fine by me. And him trying to get them to taste all kinds of new things. He also does great shopping lists of this is where we're going to be going away with these other families, and this is what we brought. And I figured they needed to take, I don't know, a large truck for all the food that they pulled together. It's great because you feel like you're on the ground with him as he goes and does some speaking, as he works with the tabletop line that he's got, or the cooking line that he's got, cookware line that he's got. Yeah, it's just like a really fun book, and I completely enjoyed being in the life of Stanley Tucci for a year. And I'd really like to have dinner with him. I'm going to stop for 1 second and I'm going to jump in and get, I think the rest is a batch of thrillers. So just give me one moment, folks. Before we pick up with thrillers, I have one more memoir to share. And I don't have a hard copy of it because I listened to it on audio as well, and the hard copy hasn't arrived yet. It's What Happens When the Luck Happens. It's, wait a second. We're going to cut this right here because this is a problem. Before I get into thrillers, I've got one other memoir that I listened to. So I don't have a hard copy right now. It's on its way to me. It's called Be Ready When the Luck Happens by Ina Garten. Been a long time fan of Ina Garten's. I loved going to the Barefoot Contessa store whenever we were out east. I thought she was just one of those people that kind of like had it all and had it all together. And what I loved as a businesswoman is seeing the moments where she had doubts and where she was sitting there and kind of like, what should we do now? What should I do? Where's my brand? There were business lessons in here, such as she was looking at her business and she realized that they were spending 95% of their time worrying about catering that was bringing in about 5% of the money. And so she stopped being a caterer. She had two stores and then moved to have one, and why she did that. And along the way, how her business moved and changed, but she always knew what she wanted to be. So when she was doing her first television show, when they were trying to make her like Martha Stewart, she said, I'm not Martha. That's not who I want to be. And so all along the way, she was looking at the next thing, but how was she going to be able to do it on her terms? When the show was first filmed, it was filmed and her life and Jeffrey's life went up in the air. She vowed never to do that again. So instead, what happened and what did she do to make it better for her? Sure, there are a lot of times where luck happens along the way, but what you do with that luck is the thing that really sets people apart. And she really was ready when the luck happened, when great things happened for her. And you see why she has a big following of readers because she's very real and down to earth. She actually talked about during the pandemic what it was like shooting herself with her little, phone camera and realizing maybe I needed two cameras and how it was everything going to actually happen and unfold. Very real story, but I also thought there were a lot of kind of like life lessons because she didn't come from a very happy childhood. But by the same token, it's also a lot of business lessons as well. So don't have a copy of that, but I think you all know what it looks like by now. All right, now we've got some thrillers. And a lot of times, I'm going to kind of disclose this year. I'm not really good on character names. I remembered as the boy, the girl, the man, the woman. When I'm sitting and reading a book, that's the way I'm reading. So if you're going to sit there and say so and so did such and such, I'm usually going to be in the dark because that is not why I was sitting the way I was sitting and seeing the book. I was just seeing the man, the woman, the story. And sometimes people start talking about the characters like, oh, yeah, that one. That's right. But I know everything that the character did. So when you're in a memoir, it can at least stay in the moment. But usually in fiction, I'm off the target. So what book was I holding backwards there for a while? It's Here One Moment by Liane Moriarty. Right, picture this. You're on an airplane. The flight's already been delayed, so you're not in a good mood. Flight's like everything's gone wrong. I mean, as somebody said once, when the flight's delayed, then you take a tour of the airport before you get to take off. So everybody's on this plane, they're already in a cranky mood. And the woman starts walking down and tells people how they're going to die. You're going to die at 7 and it's going to be this. And you're going to die at 32 and it's going to be that. And you're sitting there going, well, who's this woman on the plane and what is she doing? And immediately people are getting the flight attendant going, can you make her go away? Like this is Very, very scary. Is she having a brain like a breakdown or something like that? Why is she doing this, and why is she upsetting everybody on the plane? Well, we learn more about the woman in this book, but we also have all those passengers. And all of a sudden, like this is a big story because one of the things actually happens. One woman that she said was going to die and how she was going to die, it actually happens. And that makes it onto social media. It makes the rounds, and pff, all of a sudden it's like, oh, wow, does she have all these predictions right? And who is this woman? So, talking about we're here one moment, maybe gone the next, what's going to be happening? And if you got a prediction like that, what would it mean to your life? And you see along the way what happens with the characters that were told these various stories. Leanne got the idea one day. She was, there's two stories. She was either sitting in the airport and the flight was delayed, or sitting on a flight on a runway, sitting here thinking about what would happen. And either one leads you to where the guts of the story are. So there we've got here one moment. Here one moment, gone the next. Go to two books. Let me see. We've got Blue Hour by Paul Hawkins. This is that beautiful time of day where the light is like, incredible. So we've got the Blue Hour. We've got a island. Well, it's not really an island. It's a something that's connected to the mainland. I'm spacing on the name right now. For some of the day, not all of the day, for 12 hours of the day, it's completely inaccessible. Ooh, that's not like really great. But when it's inaccessible, what happens on that island? Could you commit a crime? Could something terrible happen or something wonderful happen? And what is it like if something happens, you have to wait 12 hours to get off the island? Okay, well, there's our premise. There's where we're like, sort of set up with our place. Okay. And then you've got an artist who's been living on this piece of property for years. And she's done all kinds of art, many different mediums, and she donates something to a museum, and it's on display at the museum. And before they put it on display, they're analyzing it, and they realize that there was a human bone in part of one of the pieces of art. Well, where's that human bone from? What's the story? What really happened out there? And someone from the museum shows up on the island where there's a woman she was a doctor, she is still a doctor, who is living there. She had been very, very, very close with the artist, and yet the artist always made her feel like she was exactly what she was, not so pretty. She wasn't so popular. She was like the girl that was kind of on the outside, and she was still on the outside. And the artist would have moments of being very close with her and moments of being very cutting. And somehow she remembered the cutting ones more. And what happens as a result between these two people, and what happens with the piece of art, and whose bone is it, and what happened out there on the island. So there we got Paul Hawkins, The Blue Hour. Ah, Sherry LaPena. Oh, how I love Sherry. Sherry is what I call the kind of author where I pick it up and I know I'm going to read the book, but it's also what I call a one sit read because I'm not going to be able to put it down. And if I start reading this at night, I'm up really, really late. In this one, oh my gosh, we've got this sleepy little town in Vermont where nothing ever happens. Huh. But then we've got something all day. It's all going to change just because of this morning. Because Diana's not lying safely in her bed before where she belongs. Instead, she lies in a hayfield, circled by vultures. I didn't know how bad vultures were till I read this book. Wow. Discovered by a local farmer. And how quickly a girl becomes a ghost. How quickly a town of friendly, familiar faces becomes a town of suspects, a place of fear and paranoia. Someone in Fairhill did this. Everyone wants the answers. And one innocent question could be deadly. So there we've got What Have You Done? And I read that simply because the copy on this is better than I could ever describe this book to you. So there you've got the story of What Have You Done? And that girl lying in the hayfield, what an opener, folks. What an opener. Okay, here we've got end of story. We've got this crime writer who's been around for years, and he is, let's put it this way, he's very, very, very well known. He's very somebody that people study. And there's a girl that's come out town, and she's going to be writing the end of the story, end of his story. He's ill, and what she's going to tell as tales about him. And at the same time, he's got a wife who went missing at one point, and what happened to her. And there are all these little pieces of a puzzle. And you're watching, it's a little cat and mouse story in some ways of who knows what about whom. And how is this all going to play out? As they drop the young woman off at this place, they say, "Oh, that's the house where the murder happened. That's the house where the women disappeared. That's the house where," and everybody just sits there and says, like, what do we know and what don't we know? And the story ratchets, ratchets, ratchets. And he's right. The past isn't gone. It's just a beginning. So what we've got is it's just waiting. I'm sorry, it's just waiting. The past isn't gone. It's just waiting. So what you've got is the past you think you've walked away from. It's just waiting to come back at you. So end of story. There's the twist in there that's extremely well done. Lisa Wingate writes a wonderful novel about Shelterwood, called Shelterwood. And this takes place in an area that she knows and loves a lot in Oklahoma. And it's just a beautiful story. She wrote Before We Were Yours. Let me do some flipping in the inside of this one as well. It's Oklahoma in 1909, and there's a little girl who knows that her stepfather doesn't have good intentions towards the two Choctaw girls who get boarded at their home as wards. And the older girl disappears, and leads for the woods. His daughter leads for the woods, taking the other child with her. And they go and hide in the shelter woods. And they're out there on the winding stair mountains, hiding from people and trying to just get away from what they know as bad men. The girls are being hidden often are indigenous, and the people are taking them away, saying, "Oh, we can teach you a better way of life," or they're just poor. And so now it's Oklahoma and it's 1990. There's a new ranger on the scene at this park area. It's going to be the Horse Thief Trail National Park. And she wants a quiet place to raise her son and get on with her life. But as soon as she gets on duty, all of a sudden there's something of like, wait a second, there's a hiker gone missing. And maybe this place is a little bit more sinister than we thought. And she is going to start looking for the truth. And she's going to use the Choctaw tribal police to help her figure out what really was happening in Shelterwood all those years ago and what's happening now. It's really, really beautifully done. It made me want to go into those mountains where the trees are so tall that the kids were actually sleeping and hiding in the knots of the trees. And it was like a whole different time and period, but also thinking back now of what do we know now that we could go back and explore what happened then. Really, really well done. Tammy Hogue is somebody we haven't heard from in a while. She was injured in an accident, I believe it was a horse accident, and she hasn't been on the scene. And this book, my gosh, when she's back, she's back. And you realize what an accomplished writer is, even when we haven't heard from her for a while. In this book, which is taking place down in Louisiana, I'm going to see, make sure I've got that right, because it's one of the places where it's hot and humid. Yeah. And what we've got is a murder victim is dumped at the end of a lonely road, and his face and his hands are kind of obliterated. So we can't see, like, who this person is. And it's not the way the sheriff wants to start off his morning. And meanwhile, there's the sheriff's detective, his wife, is back on duty, and she's like going to be thrown into this case as well. And what we're going to try and learn from what we're going to learn from this is what really happened in a small town where you had that small town hero and had the small town kind of guy that was not highly thought of at all. And you've got the whole collection of people and what happens in the small town and this area along the way that you see like things that happened when people were in high school come back to bite them. And you see who really is the people who are the champs. Is it the person who was the big football player, or is the person who played behind the scenes and was just being a good person and trying to get right and wrong done? Bad Liar. Really, really, really well done. And I just want to make sure it was Louisiana, but believe me, I believe that's where it is. It's one of those things where it doesn't really matter, but what it says is small labels are hard to shake. Hometown hero, fallen angel. Can anyone ever escape their past? So we've got a couple of books that are looking at people's past and what's going on. Next, we've got a book that was probably one of the biggest books of the year. It was All the Colors of the Dark by Chris Whitaker. This is a long book, folks. This is 600 pages. It's lots of short chapters. It is one of those books that the last 200 pages are probably one of the most fun rides that I've been taken on. And where the book ends up is just simply spectacular. I am going to recommend that when you read this book, which was a Read with Janice selection, it's being made into a movie. I think Chris is absolutely fantastic. Don't just read these short chapters and think that, oh, I can put this down at the end of chapter 31 and be done with that scene. No, there are probably going to be many more pages. And to really enjoy this book, I'm going to recommend you read it in hundreds of pages. Read 100, then read the second 100, and then read from there so that you're really immersing yourself completely in the story. My book group read this, and they all said by the last 200 pages, you're flying through. But at the beginning, a lot of stops and starts. And I said, you really got to read it in chunks to completely appreciate it. But it's easy to do because it's one of those books that's hard to put down. So carve yourself some time, carve yourself some space, and look at All the Colors of the Dark, which is one of the biggest books of the year. And it's the only reason I didn't pick it as one of my top is because I was going to give you that caveat on reading it. Because I really feel that while I loved what he was doing with the short chapters, I want to make sure you were enmeshed enough in the story before you did your stop and start again. Next, we've got The God of the Woods by Liz Moore, which takes place at a camp. Most of the story takes place at this camp. And what we've got is one summer that we're at the camp, there's a girl that disappears. One of the places I've always wanted to go is the Maldives. Everybody has described the islands there as just so beautiful. So when I saw this book by Kara Carver that's set there, I thought, ah, the perfect book to read, especially in winter. Well, it was anything but because what we've got is three women that are on a girls' getaway trip. One of them has just gotten divorced and she's footing the bill. And all of a sudden, those beautiful islands seem to have a lot more going on because there's a body found and there seems to be a lot of secrets going on. And well, I just thought it was really, really good because from one page to the next, I had no idea what was going to turn up. This is Kara Carver, which is a pseudonym's first thriller under this name. And I have to tell you, I really hope it's not her last. I got the chance to interview her, and she was just terrific because she had such an easy feel about her characters. And she immediately brought me into exactly where they were and what they were doing. And some of them were up to no good. Next, we've got an author that I know many of you know already, or Dave. And we've got The Night We Lost Him. And I like this book for a couple of different reasons. First of all, Laura really knows how to write a great thriller. She really can drag you in. As we all knew from the last thing he told me. But here she does something different as well. The man who is found dead right at the beginning of the book, in fact, we as the readers know what happened to him that evening, though the rest of the players do not. So he is missing. He's a hotel magnate. And what was really cool is he has designed these really boutique places, these places that you would want to go to get away that are really upscale. But by the same token, they've got this feel to them and this vibe that makes them more special than any place else. And as I was reading it, I was realizing not only would these be kind of places that you'd want to be, but they're really the kind of places where it could be really unwind and enjoy and be yourselves. And that's what he was writing. He was what he was creating, rather. So what we've got here is he's dead. We know this right up front. And he has children from two of his three marriages. And the children have all been treated separately. Daughter, one way, the two sons, a different way. And yet he has love for all of them and has shown up for all the big experiences of their lives. And now one of the sons and the daughter team up together and they decide that they're going to go figure out what did happen that night. She's not really on board to do it right from the beginning, but as things get started, she's really committed to figuring out what happened to their father that night. And they uncover a whole side of him that they didn't know. But the way they peel the layers of the onion back make this book really, really special in Laura's hands. Next, we've got the sequel. The sequel. Aha, who read the plot? Who read the plot? Remembers exactly what happened with the plot, the intrigue, just what was going on, the stealing, the taking. Well, here we've got the sequel because we know that the author of the plot, well, he's not around anymore. In case you haven't read it, I won't spoil that for you. And here we've got his wife, and she's got an estate, his estate that she's now privy to, and she's living quite well. And then his agent and his editor suggest that she write a book, and she does. She writes a book about a story that she knows really well, one that she's really kept hidden. And she thinks no one else knows about the story except her. But somebody does, and somebody's on her trail. And as a result, she's looking for what could have happened along the way and trying to figure out exactly uh, how do they know the story, who found it, and what is it going to mean for her. It's a sequel. Everybody has teased Jane Ann Corlitz and asked her if she's going to write the end, and she's not saying she's not going to. So let's see what happens. The sequel really picks up well where the plot went off. Next, we've got The Grays of Truth. This is by Sharon Bertz. I'm trying to get this cover. Look, this lighting is like not great for showing cover today. There it is. This takes place right after the Civil War in Baltimore. And we've got a family. Well, we've got a family, a larger family, but we're really circled on one woman and her husband and her daughter. Well, at some point during the beginning of the book, her husband goes to visit his brother, and while he's there, he's found dead. And he wasn't sick when he got there. And she can't figure out what happened. And she's got nursing experience. And the first thing she thinks of is he was poisoned. And she's very, very sure that this is what happened at this place. And it's with a sister-in-law that she doesn't really like, somebody that she's really doesn't trust. And she thinks she may have had something to do with it. But there's really not proof. And as time goes on, she's lost members of her family and she's become ill when she's in this home as well. But why is it happening? Does it have something to do with the family? Does it have something to do with, are people just really getting sick there? Does it have something to do with the thing that takes everybody in a spilled direction? Money. Yeah, it might have to do with money. Meanwhile, she's kind of not trusted because she's had troubles in her past. She's been away at a home, like an asylum. And as a result, nobody really believes what she's saying. And she finds love, and then we have to see what happens next. This is Sharon's third book that she's written as a period mystery. Actually, the first one was just a period novel. The last two were period mysteries. She just does such a good job with her storytelling. I really felt like I was in Baltimore during that time. And she did a great job of coloring the exact area and bringing us into the story with these people. And there's a lot of twists in between as well. Next up, we have The Fury by Alex Michaelides. Once again, here we've got a beautiful island and we've got a murder. And what we have is there's a group that has gone to this beautiful island on as an idyllic vacation. And as they're there, things are a lot more less relaxing than everybody plans that they're going to be. Let's see if I can read the beginning of the lines here because it's really well done. This is a tale of murder, or maybe that's not true. At its heart, it's a love story, isn't it? Lana Farrar was a reclusive ex-movie star and one of the most famous women in the world. Every year, she invites her closest friends to escape the English weather and spend Easter on her idyllic private Greek island. Another island, folks. I tell you this because you may think you know the story. You probably read about it at the time. It caused a real stir in the tabloids. It had all the necessary ingredients for a press sensation, a celebrity, a private island, cut off by the wind, and a murder. So once again, we've got a locked room mystery on an island, and what happens there is murder. So sure, I want to be going off to private islands anytime soon. Next, I've got The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. This was a big sensation over the summer. It was one of the books that was really found as one of the best thrillers of the year. It takes place as a camp, at a camp where a family has loaned most of their land, or a big portion of their land, for a summer camp to be on their property. And at that camp, they send their daughter, who's a little wayward, and actually probably more than a little wayward, and they send her there and they say to her, you're going to spend the summer there. You're not going to spend your summer in your room creating art the way you want to. You're not going to do anything the way you want to. You're going to go to camp. And while she's there, one of the nights, she disappears. When she disappears, it has really ramifications because the same thing happened years ago to her younger brother, who was also found gone and was taken. And all of a sudden, people started to say, "Well, what happened to these children? Why are they being taken? What do they know? What don't they know? And what was really going on in the woods?" So well done. I enjoyed her first novel, Long Bright River, and I enjoyed this one even more because you're really put in that place where you see where somebody's trying to get away with something, but who it is going to really surprise you as the book goes on. So you've got The God of the Woods. Next, from T.J. Newman, we've got her latest, what I call her airplane thriller, called Worst Case Scenario. TJ was a flight attendant. She spent years flying on airplanes across the country. And as she did, she was thinking of great ideas that for a book she may write somewhere along the way. Well, she wrote Falling, she wrote Drowning, both were New York Times bestsellers. And now what we've got is a new story for her, the worst case scenario. Well, everybody on this plane dies way up front. It's one of the first chapters. But where they crash is where the problem is. They crash into a nuclear reactor facility. And all of a sudden, the towns around it are very, very, very close to being in peril. In fact, it's not just that. It's if the water gets into the river nearby, the crops that most of the country eats are going to be destroyed. And as a result, they're looking for the ramifications, not just at this one place where the plane went down, but far reaching. Gives you an idea of what could happen if there was a nuclear disaster in this country, if it took place in a place just like this. And also, you think about a plane going down, but you don't think about really where the plane crashes and what that could actually mean. So everybody's dead up front, folks, but where the peril is what's going to happen for everybody who's down on the ground. So worst case scenario, really well done. Next, we've got What Happened to Nina. And this is by Dervia McTierney. And I read this and I'd heard a lot about it up front. And I said, oh, I'm going to pick this up because it just sounds like another really terrific book. So what did happen to Nina? Nobody knows. Simon's explanation about what happened to in that last hour together doesn't add up. Nina's parents push the police for answers, and Simon's parents rush to protect him. They hire expensive lawyers, an FBI firm. Sorry, let's do this one over. Quiet on the set for, okay. What Happened to Nina? It's by Dervia McTierney. And I absolutely enjoyed this book. I'd heard a lot about it before I read it. So here's what we've got. Nina and Simon are the perfect couple, young, fun, and deeply in love, until they leave for a weekend at his family's camp in Vermont, and only he comes home. Yeah, think about that. He's the only one that comes back. So no one knows what happened to Nina. And his explanations really aren't playing through. Oh, he sounds like he knows what he's doing on some point, but he can't really be trusted with what his idea is. And her family decides that they're not going to sit on ceremony. They're going to sit and figure out exactly what happened. They're going to get up off their chairs and they're going to do everything that they can to figure out what happened to Nina. We're going to look at different time frames, where people were at certain times, how they could have possibly done this, and what could have happened to Nina is really at the heart of it. But it's also how people of different classes are looked upon when you go to bring a story out there that you need to get known. So really, really well done. What Happened to Nina? Next, we've got William Kent Kruger's Spirit Crossing. And longtime readers know how much I love Kent's books. He just does such a great job of bringing you right into the story. This is one of his books that is in his series. And typically I wouldn't say, oh, you can just pick up and figure out what's going on. But Kent does such a good job of setting the stage and setting the backdrop of what's going on that you absolutely could pick up with this book. So what have we got? A teenage daughter of a prominent Minnesota politician goes missing, and a huge manhunt goes out to find her. But when Cork O'Connor's grandson, Webu, who's got really great ways of seeing what's actually going on places, he's got this mind where he actually is a little bit more clairvoyant than everyone would give him credit for. He finds a shallow grave of a young woman, young Native American woman, while he's hunting blueberries, and nobody seems to care. And what the book is about, trying to find what happened to that woman and where that woman is buried and who she is, as much as it is about talking about the difference between how we search for people who have clout behind them and those who are here. We're talking about indigenous tribes and how many times those people's stories do not get the same kind of attention when they're found missing. Something I've been following a lot. There's a number of pieces about this on Netflix. But in Kent's hands, what we've got is this young child trying to help solve what's going on, even though it will take a lot from him to be able to do that, because it's going to put him in a situation where he has to use his powers in very, very deep ways. And it could be something that could be damaging to him as well. It's so well done. It's, Spirit Crossing. I just sat down and the pages flipped by. And once again, I finished it feeling like I was really, really in northern Minnesota with Kent and with his characters, enjoying not only the scenery, but also the camaraderie that you feel up there, especially for someone who's missing, who everyone else has forgotten about. From Hank Philby Ryan, we've got one wrong word. We've got a woman, she's working at a company, she's working at a PR firm, and something happens and she's caught in being with the wrong person at the wrong time. And all of a sudden, well, there's just one wrong word that's going to get out there about her, and then she is completely going to be blackballed all across the business. So here's what we've got. Can one word ruin your life? Yeah, it probably can. And no one knows that better than Arden Ward. And I always say I don't remember characters' names, but I always said if I had a daughter, she's going to be Arden Alexandra. So this is one character name I remember. Problem is, she's forced to handle a shocking crisis of her own. She's unfairly accused of having an affair with a powerful client, and her life and her dreams are about to crash. And then she's given an ultimatum. She has to 2 weeks and to save her career and her reputation. And what's going to happen that she's going to have to do to get this one wrong word kind of expunged from her life, but at the same time, put together what is really happening in the rest of what's going on. I'm going to do what so many people have done with this book. Let me see if I can do it. Yes, this was the big thing that was all over the web. Is there you go. People promoting the book. One wrong word. Hank Philby Ryan continues to just get better and better with each book. And she weaves a story that you really sit there and you're immersed in as you're enjoying it. But by the same token, okay, what's going on, folks, here? Next, we've got I Will Ruin You by Linwood Barclay. And people know that Linwood is one of those authors whose books I always pick up and always want to read because I think he does such a great job. And so do so many of our readers. So what have we got here? How would you react in a life or death situation? That's a question everybody asks themselves, but few have to face in real life. English teacher Richard Boyle certainly never thought he would have find himself talking down a former student intent on harming others. But when Mark Ledrew shows up at his school with a bomb strapped to his chest, Richard immediately jumps into action. Thanks to some quick thinking, he averts a major tragedy and is hailed as a hero. But not all the attention focused on him is positive. His brief moment in the spotlight puts him in the sights of a deranged blackmailer who has a score to settle. So all of a sudden, what you've got is that you think you got a hero at the beginning of the book, and you've got somebody that's popping up and saying, nope, you're not a hero. In fact, what I know about you, I'm going to go out and I will ruin you. As we do with all of Linwood's books, character is so strong. The beginning of the book, you meet a number of characters. You're trying to figure out how they're going to all get together, and you're skipping from one piece to the next. And then when you get there, everything just comes together. I Will Ruin You by Linwood Barclay. Every time I see one of his books, I've got to pick it up. He's got this thing. Let's just say magazines, you had a voice, a tone, and an attitude. And that's exactly what he's got with all of his characters, no matter what book he writes. It's the right voice, the right tone, and the right attitude. And last, but certainly not least, we've got Megan Miranda's Daughter of Mine. Love this one. And it was happening against the same kind of thing that was happening for us in our area, a drought. It was days without rain. And as a result of the rain not coming down, a lot was being revealed where water may have been. Around here, we saw a lot of brush, a lot of trees that we might not have seen before. And no one was seeing what the people found in Megan Miranda's book. Main character at one point sees a car. And in the car is one that looked exactly like one her mother was driving. And in the back are two suitcases. They're mother's suitcases. So her mother left years ago, and everybody told her she left. And she couldn't figure out why she left her behind. But did she really leave, or what happened? Because all of a sudden she starts seeing all these clues that maybe her mother didn't disappear right the way everybody told her she did. She didn't walk out on her. So at first, the car discovery was a shock. The second car was a pattern, a warning, and a key to a decades-old mystery that may be better off left in the past. In Mirror Lake, I love the name, nestled in the mountains of North Carolina, is a beautiful waterfront community where neighbors know neighbors, family businesses are the norm, and a small town way of life seems to go on year after year uninterrupted. But then what really happened here? Okay, these are 40 books that I loved. May not have done the most brilliant job of describing them all, but know that when I read them all, I was completely passionate about them. And I'm hoping that you found something that you want to love, something that you missed already this year, through the year, and are right now having it brought to your attention saying, you know what, I want to read that over the next couple of weeks. I'm already reading books for 2025. I've already identified three that are coming out early in the month of January that are all going to be bets on selections. I've sort of been culling a group of books, cultivating them up on my shelf, and looking at them and saying, which do I want to read first? Why am I excited about them? Sometimes it's from what I heard from the publisher, I've heard the author speak before, or I know the author and I know the kind of material they could turn in. But either any of the ways, these 40 were the books I really, really thought were fabulous in 2024. And now let's see what we can all discover in 2025. Thanks so much for joining me. Have a great holiday and all good things for 2025. Thanks so much now.